The city of Seoul looked like a sea of glowing neon lights from the top floor of the Jang Tower. Inside the boardroom, the air was as cold as a refrigerator. Jang Hyunwoo sat at the head of a long, black table. He did not move. He did not smile. His black hair was perfectly styled, and his suit was dark and expensive. To the rest of the world, he was a successful businessman. To the people in this room, he was the Ice King, the man who ran the city's most powerful syndicate with a brain like a computer. Across from him sat 3 men in cheap suits. They were sweating even though the room was chilly. They had tried to steal money from one of Hyunwoo's shipping routes, thinking he was too busy to notice. They were wrong. Hyunwoo noticed everything. He looked at them with sharp, dark eyes that seemed to see right through their lies. "I don't like mistakes," Hyunwoo said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room like a heavy fog. "And I especially don't like people who think I am blind." The leader of the 3 men started to shake. "Boss Jang, please." It was a misunderstanding. The trucks were delayed. "We were going to pay you back double next month." Hyunwoo didn't blink. He picked up a silver fountain pen and tapped it slowly on the table. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was like a heartbeat in the silent room. Behind him stood Baek Ji-hoon, his right-hand man. Ji-hoon was built like a stone wall, his face completely blank. He was waiting for a signal. In this world, a signal from Hyunwoo usually meant someone was going to have a very bad night. "In my business, there are no misunderstandings," Hyunwoo continued. He leaned forward just an inch, and the men across from him flinched. "There is only logic. The logic says you took what belongs to me. The logic says you must be punished so others do not follow your example." The men began to beg. They offered their cars, their warehouses, and their loyalty. Hyunwoo listened to them the way a scientist looks at a bug under a microscope. He felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no excitement. To him, this was just a chore. Like cleaning a smudge off a window. He had spent years learning how to turn off his heart. He believed that feelings made a man weak. To stay at the top of the mountain in Seoul, he had to be made of ice. Finally, Hyunwoo stood up. He adjusted his silk tie and smoothed out his jacket. The meeting was over. He didn't need to yell. His silence was much scarier than shouting could ever be. "Ji-hoon," Hyunwoo said, turning his back on the begging men to look out at the city. "Take their warehouses. All of them. And make sure they never work in this city again. If they show their faces near the docks after tonight, handle it." "Yes, boss," Ji-hoon replied with a short, respectful bow. The 3 men were led out of the room. They weren't fighting anymore. They were just broken. Hyunwoo watched their reflection in the window until the door clicked shut. He was alone now in his beautiful, lonely office. He sat back down at his mahogany desk and pulled out his phone to check the nightly reports. Everything was in order. His power was absolute. His life was perfect. Or so he told himself. He didn't know that in a few minutes, a message from a tiny, terrified girl would do what no mafia rival could ever do. It would break through the ice around his heart and change his world forever. But for now, he was just the Ice King, sitting in his palace of glass, feeling absolutely nothing at all. The clock on the wall of the penthouse office was silent, but the digital numbers on the computer screen flickered to 11:42 p.m. Hyunwoo was alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the distant sounds of Seoul's late-night traffic. He was finishing a report on a new construction deal when his personal phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was a short, sharp vibration that felt out of place in the still room. He didn't pick it up at first. In his world, a message at this hour usually meant trouble at the docks or a problem with the police. He waited 5 seconds, then reached out with a steady hand. The screen glowed, illuminating his sharp features in the dark room. It was a message from a number he didn't recognize. "Mister, please. He's beating my mama. I'm under the bed. Please don't let him find me." Hyunwoo stared at the words. His first thought was that this was a mistake. His phone number was private, known only to the most powerful people in the city. This had to be a wrong number. A child somewhere had typed a digit incorrectly and sent their terror to the most dangerous man in Korea. His logical brain told him to delete the message and go back to his work. He wasn't a policeman. He wasn't a social worker. He was a man who dealt in millions of dollars and iron-fisted control. But then the phone buzzed again. "I can hear him. He's breaking things. I'm scared. Please." Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His heart, which usually beat with the steady rhythm of a machine, gave a strange, painful thud. He tried to push the feeling away. He told himself that he had no reason to care about a stranger in a city of 10 million people. But as he looked at the text, the expensive office around him seemed to vanish. Suddenly, he wasn't 32 years old anymore. He was 10 years old again, hiding in a dark corner of a semi-basement apartment. He could almost smell the damp air and hear the sound of heavy footsteps on a wooden floor. He remembered the feeling of being small and helpless while someone he loved was in pain in the next room. He remembered wishing for a hero who would never come. "This is not my business," he whispered to the empty room. His voice was cold, but his hands were beginning to tighten into fists. His logic told him that going to a random address in a poor neighborhood was a system error. It was a waste of time. It could even be a trap set by a rival gang. But his blood, the part of him that was still that scared little boy, was screaming at him to move. He realized he couldn't sit back down. He couldn't go back to his construction reports while a child was counting her breaths under a bed. He grabbed his black suit jacket from the back of his chair and slid it on. He moved with a sudden, fierce energy. He didn't call his security team, and he didn't wait for a plan. He strode out of the office and through the empty hallway, his leather shoes clicking loudly on the marble floor. When he reached the private elevator, he saw his reflection in the polished metal doors. He looked like the Ice King, calm, neat and powerful. But inside, the ice was cracking. He pulled out his phone and typed a short message back to the unknown number. He didn't ask questions. He didn't explain who he was. "I am coming," he wrote. "Stay quiet." The elevator doors opened, and Hyunwoo stepped inside. He was no longer thinking about money or territory. For the first time in 20 years, the boss of Seoul was following his heart instead of his head. He didn't know the little girl named Era, and he didn't know the monster she was hiding from, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let that child wait for a hero who never showed up. Not tonight. The private elevator reached the basement garage with a soft chime. When the doors slid open, Baek Ji-hoon was already standing there. He was checking his watch, his large frame casting a long, heavy shadow against the concrete wall. He had 3 black cars lined up, their engines idling quietly like purring predators. Ji-hoon was ready for the docks. He had the maps, the weapons, and the men prepared to settle the dispute with the warehouse thieves. But when Hyunwoo stepped out of the elevator, Ji-hoon stopped. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. The boss was moving too fast. His tie was slightly loose, and his eyes didn't have their usual calm, cold look. They looked like burning coals. "The cars are ready, boss," Ji-hoon said, opening the rear door of the lead sedan. "We can reach the waterfront in 15 minutes. The men are already waiting at the perimeter." Hyunwoo didn't get in the back seat. Instead, he walked straight to the driver's side. "Change of plans," he said. His voice was sharp, like a snapping branch. He held up his phone so Ji-hoon could see the address on the screen. It wasn't the docks. It was a district on the outskirts of the city, a place of crumbling apartments and narrow, dark alleys. Ji-hoon stared at the map. He was confused. "Boss, that's the slums. There's nothing there for us. No business, no money, no rivals. Why are we going to a place like that right now? We have the meeting at the docks. If we don't show up, people will think we are getting soft." "Let them think what they want," Hyunwoo replied. He didn't look at his friend. He just gripped the door handle. "I'm going to this address. Now." Ji-hoon stepped in front of the car door, his face clouded with worry. He had been with Hyunwoo for 10 years. He was the heavy shadow, the man who protected the boss from every threat. He knew how Hyunwoo thought. Hyunwoo was always about the big picture. He was about power and logic. Going to a poor neighborhood in the middle of the night for no clear reason made no sense at all. "Is this a trap?" Ji-hoon asked, his voice dropping low. "Did someone leak a threat? If there's trouble, let me send a scout team first. You shouldn't go into a blind spot without knowing who is waiting for you." "It's not a gang, Ji-hoon," Hyunwoo said. He finally looked up, and the expression on his face made the big man freeze. It wasn't the face of a mafia boss looking for a fight. It was the face of a man who was haunted by something from a long time ago. "It's a child. She sent a message. She's in trouble." Ji-hoon opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He wanted to say that children got into trouble every day. He wanted to say that they had more important things to do than answer a wrong number text. But he saw the way Hyunwoo's jaw was set. He realized that this wasn't a business decision. This was something deep and personal. "I'm driving," Ji-hoon said firmly. He didn't ask any more questions. He knew when his boss had made up his mind. He signaled to the other men to stay back. This wasn't a mission for a whole squad. This was a private matter. Hyunwoo didn't argue. He climbed into the passenger seat, while Ji-hoon jumped behind the wheel. The tires screeched against the garage floor as the heavy car roared toward the exit. As they burst out into the cool night air, the bright lights of the city center began to fade behind them. They were heading toward the darkness of the outskirts. Ji-hoon drove with expert skill, weaving through the late-night traffic. He kept glancing at Hyunwoo in the rearview mirror. The boss was staring at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, waiting for another vibration. The silence in the car was heavy. Ji-hoon felt uneasy. He was used to protecting Hyunwoo from bullets and knives, but he didn't know how to protect him from whatever memory was currently attacking him. "We will be there in 10 minutes, Ji-hoon said, pushing the engine harder. Hyunwoo nodded once. He didn't say thank you. He just watched the shadows of the tall buildings grow longer and gloomier as they entered the poorer part of Seoul. The heavy shadow realized that tonight, the business of the syndicate didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was reaching that address before the child's messages stopped coming. Rain began to fall as the car sped away from the bright city lights. The droplets hit the windshield like tiny bullets, and the rhythm of the wipers sounded like a ticking clock. Hyunwoo leaned his head against the cold glass of the window. The blurry streetlights outside turned into long streaks of yellow and white. As the car splashed through deep puddles, the sound of the water carried Hyunwoo away from the present. He wasn't a powerful man in an expensive car anymore. In his mind, he was back in the past. He remembered a night just like this one, 20 years ago. The air in their tiny, semi-basement apartment had been thick with the smell of damp concrete and cheap cigarettes. Young Hyunwoo had been sitting in the shadows of the kitchen, trying to make himself as small as possible. He was wearing a faded t-shirt, and his stomach was rumbling because there had been no money for dinner. In the other room, he could hear the heavy, stumbling footsteps of his stepfather. Then came the shouting. It was a loud, ugly sound that seemed to shake the thin walls of their home. Hyunwoo's mother was crying, her voice soft and pleading. She was telling the man to be quiet, reminding him that the boy was trying to sleep. But the man didn't care. He was full of a strange, dark anger that he liked to take out on people smaller than him. Young Hyunwoo had gripped the edge of the wooden table until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to run into the room. He wanted to scream and fight and pull the man away. But he was only 10 years old. His arms were thin, and his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every time a chair was overturned or a plate shattered against the floor, Hyunwoo flinched. He felt a deep, hot shame in his chest. He felt like a coward because he was too afraid to move. He remembered crawling into the narrow space under his bed, much like the little girl Era was doing now. He had pressed his hands over his ears, but he could still hear everything. He had closed his eyes and prayed for someone, anyone, to walk through the front door and save them. He waited for a hero with a loud voice and strong arms to end the nightmare. But the door never opened. The only sound was the rain hitting the small, high window of their basement home. Eventually, the house had grown quiet, but it was a scary kind of silence. When Hyunwoo finally gathered the courage to peek out, he saw his mother sitting on the floor, trying to pick up the pieces of a broken bowl. Her face was bruised, and her hands were shaking. She looked up and saw him. And even though she was the one in pain, she tried to smile. "Go back to sleep, Hyunwoo," she had whispered. "Everything is okay." But everything was not okay. That was the night the ice began to grow around Hyunwoo's heart. He decided that he would never be small again. He decided that he would never wait for a hero again. If the world was a place where the strong hurt the weak, then he would become the strongest man of all. He would build a life where no one could ever hurt him or the people he chose to protect. A sudden jolt of the car brought him back to the present. Ji-hoon had turned a sharp corner into a dark, narrow street. The tall, shiny skyscrapers were gone, replaced by old brick buildings with tangled power lines hanging overhead. The rain was coming down harder now, flooding the gutters. Hyunwoo looked down at his hands. They were the hands of a man who held a city in his grip. He had the money, the men, and the power he had always dreamed of. But as he thought about Era hiding under her bed, he realized that all his power meant nothing if he arrived too late. The shame he had felt as a 10-year-old boy came rushing back, fueling his fire. "Faster, Ji-hoon," Hyunwoo said, his voice cracking the silence of the car. Ji-hoon didn't say a word. He just pressed his foot down on the gas pedal. The engine roared, and the black sedan flew through the dark neighborhood like a ghost. Hyunwoo gripped the door handle, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He had missed his chance to save his own mother 20 years ago, but he was not going to miss this one. Tonight, the hero he had waited for as a child was finally coming, and he was wearing a black suit. The car sped deeper into the old neighborhood, the tires splashing through the dark rain. Inside the sedan, the only light came from the glowing screen of Hyunwoo's phone. He kept his eyes fixed on the device, his finger hovering over the glass. Every second felt like a minute, and every minute felt like an hour. He was trying to stay calm, trying to be the cold leader he had trained himself to be, but his breathing was becoming fast and shallow. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a text. A small box appeared on the screen, showing that a photo was loading. Hyunwoo felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. The signal in this part of the city was weak, and the little circle spun around and around as the image downloaded. When the picture finally popped onto the screen, Hyunwoo's breath stopped. The photo was blurry and dark, taken from a very low angle, likely from someone peeking out from under a bed. It showed a small, cramped living room lit by a single, flickering lamp. In the middle of the floor, a woman was lying very still. It was Mi-kyung, Era's mother. Her hair was messy, and even in the bad light, Hyunwoo could see the dark shape of a bruise forming on her cheek. Near her, a heavy glass bottle lay shattered into 100 sparkling pieces. The image was more than just a picture to Hyunwoo. It was a spear that went straight through the ice he had built around his heart. For years, he had told himself that he was a man of logic. He told himself that emotions were just a distraction. But looking at that woman on the floor, and knowing that a terrified little girl was holding the phone just a few feet away, his composure finally cracked. His hand began to shake, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning his skin. This wasn't a business deal. This wasn't a fight over territory. This was an attack on the very thing he had spent his whole life trying to forget. The man in the black suit was gone, replaced by someone who wanted to tear the world apart to make things right. Ji-hoon, Hyunwoo said. His voice was no longer quiet or calm. It sounded like grinding metal. Ji-hoon glanced over and saw the photo on the screen. He saw the woman on the floor and the sheer terror captured in that one accidental shot. The big man's face went dark. He didn't need to be told what to do. He gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. 3 minutes, boss, Ji-hoon promised. He swung the car onto a sidewalk to bypass a delivery truck, the engine screaming as he pushed the car to its limit. Hyunwoo looked back at the photo. He zoomed in on the corner of the image. There, he could see the edge of a small, pink blanket hanging off a bed. That was where Era was. She was so close to the danger. Watching her mother suffer, just like he had done 20 years ago. He thought about his own mother's tired smile and the way she had tried to protect him even when she was hurt. He realized that he had spent his life becoming powerful so that he would never feel this way again. He had built an empire, so he would never be the boy under the bed. But the feeling was back, and it was stronger than ever. The logic was gone. The system error had taken over his entire mind. "I'm almost there, Era," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. He didn't care about the docks anymore. He didn't care about the millions of one he might lose by missing his meeting. He only cared about the person who had caused that woman to fall. He cared about the monster who was making a little girl take photos of her own nightmare. As the car turned onto the final street, Hyunwoo reached into his jacket. He made sure his movements were precise. He was done being the Ice King. Tonight, he was the fire that was going to burn the shadows away. The car skidded to a stop at the end of a dead-end street. The tires sent a spray of muddy water onto the side of a rusting dumpster. Ahead of them stood a row of old, gray apartment buildings. They looked like giant tombstones in the dark. There were no bright neon signs here, only the dim glow of a few street lamps that flickered every few seconds. The rain was still falling, making the brick walls look slick and black. Hyunwoo did not wait for Ji-hoon to open the door. He stepped out into the cold air, his expensive leather shoes sinking into a deep puddle. He didn't even notice the water ruining his clothes. His eyes were locked on a single window on the second floor where a faint, yellowish light was visible. That was the place. That was the room from the photo. "Stay here and keep the engine running," Hyunwoo ordered. His voice was flat and cold, but there was a dangerous edge to it that made even Ji-hoon take a step back. "Boss, let me go first," Ji-hoon pleaded, reaching for the door handle. "We don't know what's inside." You shouldn't go in without a shield. No, Hyunwoo said, slamming the car door shut. This one is mine. If anyone else tries to enter this building, stop them. He walked toward the entrance of the building. He didn't run. He moved with the slow, steady pace of a hunter who knew his prey had nowhere to go. The front door of the apartment complex was broken, hanging off its hinges. As he stepped into the hallway, the smell of old cooking oil and damp would fill his nose. The stairs groaned under his weight as he climbed to the second floor. Every sound seemed 10 times louder in the quiet building. When he reached the door to apartment 2B, he stopped. He could hear a man's voice shouting from inside. It was a loud, ugly bark. He heard the sound of a heavy hand hitting a table and the muffled sob of a woman. Hyunwoo's face remained as still as a statue, but his eyes were filled with a dark, terrible light. He reached out and touched the door handle. It was locked. He didn't bother knocking. He didn't ask for permission to enter. Hyunwoo stepped back, lifted his leg, and kicked the door with all the strength of his rage. The wood splintered with a sound like a gunshot, and the door flew open, hitting the wall with a deafening thud. The room inside was exactly like the photo, but worse. The air smelled of cheap liquor and fear. Mi-kyung was huddled on the floor near the sofa, her hands over her head. Standing over her was Oh Sung-tae. He was a large man with a red, sweaty face and messy hair. He held a half-empty bottle in one hand. He turned toward the door, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. He looked at Hyunwoo's expensive suit and his sharp, angry face. "Who the heck are you?" Sung-tae growled, swaying on his feet. "Get out of my house before I kill you." Hyunwoo didn't say a word. He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the floor. He saw the broken glass. He saw the bruises on the woman's arms. And then he looked toward the small bedroom door that was slightly ajar. He knew that somewhere in that dark room, a little girl was holding a phone and praying for a miracle. Hyunwoo took off his suit jacket and draped it over a chair near the door. He moved slowly, almost calmly. He began to roll up his white sleeves, revealing arms that were lean and powerful. He looked at Sung-tae not as a man, but as a piece of trash that needed to be thrown away. The Ice King was gone. The boy who had hidden under the bed was gone. All that was left was a man who had come to keep a promise that was 20 years late. Oh Sung-tae stood in the middle of the messy living room, swaying back and forth. His breath smelled like old beer and cigarettes. He looked at Hyunwoo's expensive silk tie and his perfectly polished shoes. To a man like Sung-tae, who spent his life in dirty alleys and loud bars, Hyunwoo looked like a lost model or a rich kid who had taken a wrong turn on his way to a fancy party. He didn't see a threat. He only saw someone he thought he could bully. "What is this?" Sung-tae laughed, a loud and ugly sound that made Mi-kyung flinch on the floor. "Did the prince get lost in the slums? Look at you. You look like you've never had a speck of dirt on those hands in your life." Hyunwoo did not answer. He stepped over a broken picture frame, his eyes fixed on Sung-tae's face. He was calculating the distance. He was measuring the weight of the man's heavy, slow arms. In his mind, Hyunwoo was already deconstructing him. He saw every weakness, every slow movement caused by the alcohol in the man's blood. "I'm talking to you, pretty boy," Sung-tae roared, his face turning a dark, angry red. He smashed his bottle against the wooden table, leaving a jagged edge of glass in his hand. "You think because you have a nice suit and a fancy watch that you can just walk into my house? I've broken tougher guys than you for breakfast. You're nothing but a doll in a suit." Mi-kyung reached out her hand, her voice a weak whisper. "Please, just go. He'll hurt you. Just run away while you can." Sung-tae kicked at the air near her, making her shrink back. "Shut up. I'll deal with you when I'm done with this intruder." He turned back to Hyunwoo, waving the broken bottle. "Well, you got nothing to say. Are you too scared to speak? Maybe you should go back to your penthouse before I ruin that expensive face of yours." Hyunwoo finally stopped 3 feet away from the larger man. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't look scared. He didn't even look angry. He looked bored, the way a person looks at a fly that keeps buzzing around their ear. "You talk a lot," Hyunwoo said. His voice was a low, dangerous hum. "Men who hurt women and children usually do. It helps them feel big. But in my world, the loud ones are always the first to fall." Sung-tae's eyes narrowed. He didn't like the way this stranger was looking at him. He expected fear, but all he saw was a cold, dark void. It made him uncomfortable. He lunged forward with a clumsy growl, swinging the broken bottle toward Hyunwoo's throat. It was a slow, wide movement that a child could have seen coming. Hyunwoo didn't even move his feet. He simply tilted his head to the side, and the glass whistled past his ear, hitting nothing but air. Before Sungtae could pull his arm back, Hyunwoo's hand shot out like a snake. He grabbed Sungtae's wrist in a grip that felt like a steel vise. The sound of bones shifting under the pressure was sickening. Sungtae's eyes went wide, and the bottle dropped from his useless fingers, shattering on the floor. He tried to pull away, but it was like trying to move a mountain. He looked at Hyunwoo's face again, and this time, he finally saw the monster hiding behind the pretty boy mask. He saw the Ice King of Seoul, and for the first time that night, the abuser felt the cold grip of true terror. "You wanted to know who I am," Hyunwoo whispered, leaning in close so only Sungtae could hear. "I am the nightmare you invited into this house when you decided to be a coward. And I am the last thing you are going to see before your world ends." The living room was quiet except for the sound of Sungtae's heavy, terrified breathing. The big man tried to pull his arm away, but Hyunwoo did not move. He held Sungtae's wrist with a grip that felt like a cold iron shackle. Sungtae looked at Hyunwoo's face and realized he had made a terrible mistake. This was not a pretty boy from a magazine. This was a man who lived in the darkness. A man who knew exactly how to break things. Hyunwoo moved with the speed of a lightning bolt. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need one. He used his palm to strike Sungtae's chest, sending the larger man stumbling backward until he crashed into a wooden bookshelf. Books and dusty old vases rained down on Sungtae's head. He tried to stand up, his face twisted in a mix of anger and shock, but Hyunwoo was already there. "You think you are strong because you can hit someone who cannot hit you back," Hyunwoo said. His voice was as calm as a frozen lake, which made it even scarier. "But true strength is knowing when to hold back. You are just a coward with loud hands." Sungtae swung a wild, heavy fist at Hyunwoo's head. Hyunwoo didn't even flinch. He simply stepped to the side and caught the man's arm, twisting it behind his back in one smooth motion. The sound of Sungtae's shoulder popping filled the room. The abuser let out a sharp, high-pitched scream that sounded like a wounded animal. It was a sound he had probably made Mikyung, an era, make many times before. Now, it was his turn to feel the pain. Hyunwoo leaned in close to Sungtae's ear. "Do you feel that? That is the feeling of being helpless. That is the fear you put into a child's heart tonight." Hyunwoo didn't stop there. He wasn't just fighting, he was teaching a lesson. He struck Sungtae's legs, making the man fall to his knees. Then, he grabbed Sungtae by the collar and dragged him toward the middle of the room. Every time Sungtae tried to beg or speak, Hyunwoo delivered a short, sharp blow that silenced him. It was a clinical and precise beating. Hyunwoo knew exactly where to hit to cause the most pain without ending the man's life. He wanted Sungtae to be awake for every second of this. Mikyung watched from the floor, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and relief. She had never seen anyone move like this. Hyunwoo looked like a shadow come to life, a dark angel who had arrived to balance the scales of justice. He was not messy or loud. He was a professional. Finally, Hyunwoo let go of the man's collar. Sungtae slumped to the floor, a broken heap of a man. His face was a map of bruises, and he couldn't even lift his head. He was shaking, tears of pain and terror streaming down his face. The tough guy who had been smashing bottles and shouting threats just minutes ago was now nothing more than a pile of shivering clothes. Hyunwoo stood over him, straightening his white shirt sleeves. He wasn't even out of breath. He looked down at Sungtae with a cold, disgusted expression. "In my world, we have a price for everything," Hyunwoo whispered. "Tonight, you paid the price for your cruelty. But the debt is not settled yet. If you ever breathe the same air as this woman again, I will not be this gentle." Sungtae could only moan in response. He was broken in ways that a doctor couldn't easily fix. He had learned what real fear felt like, and it was a lesson he would never forget. Hyunwoo turned away from the fallen man, his mind already moving to the most important person in the house. The fight was over, but the most difficult part was yet to come. The living room was suddenly quiet, except for the soft sound of the rain against the window. Oh Sungtae was a heap on the floor, no longer a threat to anyone. Hyunwoo took a deep breath, trying to let the heat of his anger cool down. He turned his back on the broken man and looked toward the small bedroom door. The ice in his heart had melted, leaving behind a strange, aching feeling he hadn't felt in 20 years. He walked toward the bedroom with soft, careful steps. He didn't want to make any loud noises that might scare the person hiding inside. He pushed the door open slowly. The room was dark, smelling of old dust and the sweet scent of a child's shampoo. A small nightlight in the shape of a star glowed dimly in the corner, casting long, shaky shadows on the walls. Hyunwoo looked at the bed. The pink blanket he had seen in the photo was hanging down, touching the floor. He knew she was under there. He could hear a tiny, jagged sound, the sound of a child trying very hard not to cry out loud. It was a sound that broke his heart more than any bullet could. He did not reach under the bed. He did not grab the blanket. Instead, the most powerful man in Seoul slowly lowered himself until his knees hit the hard floor. He sat there for a moment in the dark, letting his presence be known without being scary. He put his phone on the floor, the screen still glowing with their conversation. "Era?" he said. His voice was no longer the sharp blade he used in the boardroom. It was soft and gentle, like a whisper in a library. "My name is Hyunwoo. I'm the one you messaged." There was no answer, but the tiny sobbing sound stopped. The room became very still. "I promised I would come," Hyunwoo continued. He kept his hands flat on the floor where she could see them if she looked out. "The bad man is gone. He won't hurt your mama ever again. I sent my friend to help her, and she is going to be okay." Slowly, the pink blanket moved. A pair of small, wide eyes peeked out from the shadows beneath the bed. Era's face was pale, and her dark hair was messy and stuck to her damp cheeks. She looked at the man in the expensive suit. She saw his sharp features and his dark hair. But she also saw something else. She saw the way his eyes looked tired and kind, not angry like the man who had been shouting earlier. "Are you the hero?" she whispered. Her voice was so small it was almost lost in the sound of the rain. Hyunwoo felt a lump in his throat. He didn't feel like a hero. He knew the things he had done to build his empire. He knew the blood on his hands from years of mafia business. But as he looked at this little girl, he realized he wanted to be the person she thought he was. He wanted to be the hero he had waited for when he was her age. "I'm just a man who kept a promise," Hyunwoo said. He reached out very slowly and held out his hand, palm up. "But I will make sure you are safe from now on. You can come out now. I won't let anything happen to you." Era looked at his hand, then back at his face. She saw the sincerity in his expression. Slowly, she crawled out from under the bed. She was wearing a soft, pastel-striped sweater that looked a little too big for her. She was trembling like a leaf in a storm. When she finally stood up, she didn't run away. She stepped toward Hyunwoo and reached out, gripping his sleeve with her tiny fingers. Hyunwoo didn't move. He let her hold on to him as she began to cry, real, heavy tears of relief. He realized that in this moment, he wasn't the Ice King of Seoul. He wasn't a boss or a criminal. He was just a shield for a child who had nowhere else to turn. He stayed there on the floor, letting her lean against him, proving that not every man who entered a house in the dark was a monster. The bedroom door creaked open further, and the heavy shadow of Baek Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway. He stopped when he saw the most powerful man in Seoul sitting on a dusty floor, letting a little girl cry into his expensive suit jacket. Ji-hoon had seen Hyunwoo face down entire gangs without blinking, but seeing him like this, soft and quiet, made the big man pause in surprise. He looked from the boss to the child, then out toward the living room where the broken body of Oh Sung-tae lay still. "Boss," Ji-hoon whispered, his voice deep but careful. "The building is secure. No one else is coming. What are the orders for the mess in the other room?" Usually, when Ji-hoon asked about a mess, it meant it was time to make someone disappear forever. In their world, a man like Sung-tae would normally be taken to the docks and never seen again. Ji-hoon waited for the cold, logical command he expected. He expected Hyunwoo to tell him to dispose of the body and wipe the apartment clean of any evidence that they were ever there. Hyunwoo looked up. His eyes were no longer full of rage, but they were still as sharp as diamonds. He gently patted Era's hair, making sure she felt safe before he spoke. He looked at Ji-hoon and shook his head. "We aren't doing things the old way tonight," Hyunwoo said. His voice was firm. "Call the private medical team at the central hospital. I want the best surgeons on standby. Tell them they are treating a woman named Mi-kyung-shin. She is to have the best room, the best medicine, and 24-hour protection. If a single nurse asks a question she shouldn't, remind them who owns the building." Ji-hoon nodded, quickly typing the orders into his phone. "And the man, boss? Do I take him to the basement?" Hyunwoo glanced toward the living room with a look of pure disgust. "No, don't waste a bullet on him. I want you to erase him. Use our contacts in the city hall and the police station. By tomorrow morning, Osungtae should not exist. Delete his bank accounts. Cancel his phone. Remove his name from the apartment lease. If he tries to use his ID, it should show up as fake. If he tries to talk to a neighbor, make sure they have been paid to forget his face. Ji-hoon blinked. This was a different kind of punishment. It was more than just death. It was being turned into a ghost while still alive. I understand. He will have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. He will be a stranger in his own city. Exactly, Hyunwoo said. But before you toss him into the street, make sure he understands that if he ever looks at this building again, the Ice King will come back. And next time, I won't just erase his name. I'll erase everything else. Ji-hoon gave a short, respectful bow. He moved into the living room, picking up the unconscious Sungtae as if he were a bag of trash. Behind him, a team of cleanup experts in plain clothes entered the apartment. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like professional cleaners. They began to pick up the broken glass, fix the shattered table, and wipe away the blood. They worked in total silence, moving like ghosts through the small home. Hyunwoo stood up, slowly lifting Era into his arms. She was small and light, her head resting tiredly on his shoulder. He walked into the living room and saw Mikyung being helped up by 2 female medics he had summoned. She looked terrified, but when she saw Era safe in Hyunwoo's arms, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Everything is being handled, Hyunwoo told the mother. A car is waiting downstairs to take you to a safe place. You don't have to worry about money, the rent, or that man ever again. From this moment on, you are under my protection. The apartment that had been a place of nightmares just an hour ago was now being transformed. The broken door was being replaced with a new, steel-reinforced one. The shadows were being chased away by the bright lights of the medical team. As Hyunwoo carried Era toward the exit, he realized that cleaning up didn't just mean hiding a crime. Tonight, it meant sweeping away a family's pain and giving them a clean floor to stand on. For the first time, the boss's power felt like it was finally being used for something that truly mattered. The days following the storm were quiet, but for Hyunwoo, everything had changed. He sat in his high-rise office, looking at a map of the district where Era and Mikyung lived. Usually, this map was used to track shipments and territory, but now, his focus was on a single street corner. He was no longer thinking about how to take over the city. He was thinking about how to build a wall around 2 people so that the world could never hurt them again. He called Baek Ji-hoon into the room. The big man stood at attention, waiting for the boss to speak. Hyunwoo didn't look up from the map. He pointed to the apartment building where the rescue had happened. I want a new protocol for this area, Hyunwoo said. His voice was steady and serious. I don't want a single person entering that building without us knowing who they are. But I don't want the neighbors to be scared. We aren't going to stand on the porch with guns. We are going to be shadows. Ji-hoon nodded. He understood. The new protocol was the name they gave to their most important security jobs. I have already hired 10 men who don't look like syndicate members. They look like regular people. We have a delivery driver who will always be parked on the corner. We have a janitor who will work in the hallway. We even have a security guard for the little grocery store across the street. Good, Hyunwoo said. He stood up and walked to the window. They are not to interfere with their lives. Era and her mother should feel like they are living a normal, happy life. They should feel like the world has simply become a kinder place. If a light bulb breaks, the janitor fixes it before they ask. If they walk home late, the delivery driver makes sure his headlights light their path. They are never to know we are there. Ji-hoon made a note on his tablet. And the cost, boss? This is a very expensive operation for a small apartment. It doesn't bring in any profit. Hyunwoo turned around, and for a moment, the Ice King look returned to his eyes. The profit is their safety, Ji-hoon. That is more valuable than any shipment at the docks. Every week, I want a report. I want to know if Era is doing well in school. I want to know if Mikyung's doctor is happy with her recovery. If anyone at all, threatens them, I don't want a report. I want that person removed before they can even say a word. Ji-hoon bowed. He saw that this was the new law of the Jang Syndicate. The most dangerous men in Seoul were now being used as guardian angels. It was a strange sight to see, but Ji-hoon felt a sense of pride. They had spent years taking things from the city. Now, they were finally giving something back. In the weeks that followed, the plan worked perfectly. To the rest of the neighborhood, It just seemed like the area was getting safer. The trash was picked up on time. The streetlights were always bright. The strange, scary men who used to hang around the corners had vanished, replaced by polite workers who always had a kind word for the residents. Era began to walk to school with a skip in her step. She wore her pastel sweaters and carried a new backpack that had mysteriously appeared as a gift from a local shop. She didn't see the man in the parked car who watched her cross the street with a sharp, protective eye. She didn't see the painter on the ladder who stopped working every time a stranger got too close to her mother. Hyunwoo watched from his high palace in the sky. He checked the hidden cameras and read the daily notes. For the first time in his life, he felt like his power had a purpose. He wasn't just a boss, he was a shield. He had created a world where a little girl didn't have to hide under a bed, and in doing so, he had finally started to heal the boy who was still hiding in his own heart. The new protocol was more than just security. It was his way of making sure that the shadows only belonged to him, while Era and her mother lived in the light. 6 months had passed since the night of the storm. It was a warm spring evening in Seoul, and the city was glowing with a soft, pink light from the setting sun. Jang Hyunwoo sat in his office at the top of the Jang Tower. His desk was covered in papers about new buildings and shipping lines, but his mind was not on his business. He was looking at a small, digital folder on his computer that held no financial reports. It was a folder he checked every single day. His life was still busy, and he was still the most powerful man in the city. To the world, he was still the Ice King. When he walked into a room, people still stopped talking and stood up straight. But the ice was no longer a wall that kept everyone out. It was a shield he used to keep the world safe for the people he cared about. Suddenly, the personal phone on his desk vibrated. It was that same short, sharp sound that had started everything 6 months ago. Hyunwoo's heart did not thud with fear this time. Instead, a small, rare smile touched the corners of his mouth. He picked up the phone and saw a message from the number he now knew by heart. It was a photo, but it wasn't a dark, blurry picture taken from under a bed. This photo was bright and colorful. It was a picture of a drawing Era had made in her art class at school. In the drawing, there were 3 people. There was a woman with long hair and a bright smile, and a little girl in a pastel-striped sweater. Standing next to them was a tall man in a black suit. He had sharp hair and a serious face, but the girl had drawn a big, yellow heart on his chest. At the bottom of the page, in neat, careful handwriting, were the words, "To my hero, Matt." Hyunwoo stared at the screen for a long time. He remembered how he used to delete every message the moment he read it. He used to think that keeping things was a sign of weakness. He believed that a man in his position should leave no tracks and have no attachments. But as he looked at the drawing of the man with the yellow heart, he didn't feel weak. He felt stronger than he ever had when he was just a cold boss. He thought about his mother and how she would have felt if someone had protected them like this. He realized that by saving Era, he had finally saved the little boy he used to be. The shame and the fear that had lived in his chest for 20 years were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. He had spent his whole life trying to be a king, but he discovered that being a hero to one little girl was a much greater title. Hyunwoo did not put the phone away. He tapped the screen and hit the button to save the photo to his private gallery. He even set it as his lock screen for a moment, just to see the bright colors against the dark background of his phone. "Boss," Ji-hoon said, knocking softly on the door before entering. "The cars are ready for the dinner meeting with the investors. They are waiting for you in the lobby." Hyunwoo stood up and straightened his silk tie. He put the phone in his pocket, feeling the weight of it against his leg. It was a weight he liked carrying. "Tell them I'll be there in a minute," Hyunwoo said. He looked out the window one last time. He knew that across the city, in a bright, safe apartment, Era was finishing her dinner and her mother was reading her a story. They were living in the light, and he was happy to be the shadow that made it possible. As he walked toward the elevator, his face was calm and serious, just like always. To the investors downstairs, he would still be the Ice King. But as he felt the phone in his pocket, he knew the truth. He wasn't just a boss anymore. He was a guardian. And as the elevator doors closed, Jang Hyunwoo smiled, a real, warm smile that reached his eyes. The system was no longer broken. It was exactly the way it was meant to be.